Hello, hello, you big, beautiful, fantastic rock you are. Welcome to the podcast, Brothers of Many Words. I'm your host, RP.
Co-host King Mackie.
Special guest Christopher.
Tonight is Sunday night podcast. It's a book club, and so the uh, the purpose of the podcast is to have open discussions on various subjects by way of reading books, articles related to topics picked, which would allow us to discuss, review, debate, and enlighten ourselves along the way, as well as those who wish to join us on this beautiful journey. And this year's topic is origins of religions. We are doing the book Ancient Africa. We got the last part of it tonight, part two tonight. It's a beautiful book, beautiful book. So
Yes.
we're going to kick this off with some words of inspiration. Every step you take towards your goals,
Yes.
no matter how small, is a declaration that you refuse to stay where you are. Growth is not always visible, but it is always happening when you stay committed, disciplined, and focused. Challenges are not barriers. They are proving grounds that shape your resilience and sharpen your purpose. Believe in your ability to evolve even when progress feels slow. Stay patient with yourself, but never settle. You are building something greater than a moment. You are building a life defined by purpose, strength, and consistency that will carry you further than doubt ever could.
Amen.
Thought that was a powerful
Like
quote right there.
that.
Very
Very
on.
powerful quote right there.
Yeah, it is. Very
Absolutely,
powerful.
absolutely. So we do three bullet points, and we'll have questions after each bullet points that we'll all chime in and answer. If you have, for those who are listening, we certainly encourage your input and your thoughts and comments on what we're going over tonight. And I believe first the first chapter will be the Empire of Aksum. The Empire of
Oh,
Aksum.
right. All right. All right. I got the Empire, the Kingdom Axum, geography. Here's my first bullet point is on power, control the flow, control the wealth. Okay. So the Kingdom Axum didn't just participate in trade, it controlled a critical intersection of global commerce between Africa and the Red Sea and routes leading toward the Mediterranean Sea. This meant Axum could tax goods, regulate access, and influence multiple regions at once, essentially acting like a gatekeeper of wealth. These ports connected inland Africa, resources like gold and ivory to global market. Here's just a saying: power isn't always about military dominance; it's about positioning. Whosoever controls the pipeline, trade routes, data, or energy controls the system. So, my first question to you, brothers, is how did Acom location along major trade routes shape its rise, and what modern countries today benefit from similar geographical advantages?
Hey, that's a great question. So from where they were positioned, near the Red Sea. So that was linking them
Hmm.
to Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, especially India, and also it connected them with the Roman Empire and the Eastern markets.
Hmm.
So with the
Right.
control of the trade routes, they had and they also controlled, the ports of Dulles and allowing to
Hmm.
tax and manage trade goods, such as
Hmm.
gold and ivory and
Right.
spices and textiles. And, not only were they controlling it, but they were also the middleman. And so they were
Right.
making profit at the same time they control, they make a profit as well. And
Yep.
so, with economic power comes political power. So
Yes.
they minted their own coins. They built strong armies. Their
Hmm.
influence spread across the Red Sea into Arabia. Cultural exchange. They had new religion. They got into, but they adopted Christianity, new technology, diplomatic connections. So with the similarities with modern countries,
Hmm.
so you can think of Egypt. They control the Suez Canal. They also have connects with which connects them to Europe and Asia. There's
Right.
a Singapore, located on a major shipping route in Indian Pacific Ocean. It's one of the
Hmm.
busiest ports globally. it's a modern trade hub. You have Turkey as well, and also the United Arab Emirates. So location creates opportunity, but control of that creates location creates power. You know,
Right.
like Axum, managing those trade routes and the global crossroads that allowed them to accumulate wealth, build influence, shape
Hmm.
international systems, made them a very powerful nation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty much agreeing with you there, RP. One of the biggest similarities in a country today, you mentioned Singapore and Malaysia. I've personally been there myself. It's a very wealthy country, very clean country as well. And the reason why they're so wealthy is because they have a major trade hub. They're a major trade hub country for the world, and so they can accumulate a lot of wealth because of that. And Axum was in a similar position, and that's I believe what the reason why they collected all their wealth. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have been wealthy at all.
The Straits of Hormuz.
Yes.
I mean, controlling 40 to 6% of the global economy. That's powerful right there.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And even though, the United States is known for its dominance, its military dominance and power, yet again, it's just showing some similarities of the past. Definitely of the past.
And really, it seems like a lot of similarities with a lot of the ancient African kingdoms, where they're wealthy because of trade.
Mm-hmm.
They're very good at trade.
Yeah.
And most of most of the location of these kingdoms were around like the Red Sea or the Niger River.
Right. Now we know why they wanted to be colonized. Badly.
Absolutely.
Okay. So bullet point number 2 is religion as strategic. Unity, identifying, and influence. So when King Enza adopted Christianity, it marked a turning point at Axum's identity and global alignment. The decision helped unify diverse populations under one belief system. It established legitimacy and authority for the king, a divine backing, strengthened ties with Christian religions. Religion became a tool of governments, not just faith. It shaped laws, culture, and loyalty. So my question to you brothers today is, when King Nzana's adoption of Christianity, was it more of a spiritual decision or was it a political decision to unify and strengthen the empire? Your thoughts?
I think it was more. I think it was both, but leaning more towards the spiritual side because she was heavily influenced by a Christian teacher by the name of Frumentius, and he heavily influenced her on the Christian end. But I believe she also knew the benefit, and I don't think her kingdom would have been as successful if she didn't convert over to Christianity.
Right.
But I think it was something she wanted to do on the personal end as well.
Right. Okay.
And Chris is right. I'll piggyback off that. It was I agree with him. It's a little bit of both. His his adoption of Christianity from historical records, was sincere. He switched the inscriptions from the deities, the traditional gods, to the Christian gods. And public declarations of faith and whatnot. And so, from a political standpoint, in unifying the government, being that they had diverse beliefs and traditions, being able to create one single religion, helped shape the identity and cohesion of the empire. It gave at the same time as well too, the Roman Empire had also adopted Christianity, so that helped them as well with international prestige and whatnot.
Right.
And so, which was it? It was spiritual in origin, but politically powerful in impact for sure. His belief gave the decision authenticity, and his leadership turned that belief into a tool for unity and strength. It was a little bit of both.
Yeah. I would agree with both of y'all. All right. Bulletin point number 3, collapse, when systems fail to adapt. The fall of kingdom of Axum wasn't sudden. It was a slow breakdown caused by multiple pressures. Internal issues, deforestation and overuse of land led to soil exhaustion and reduced agricultural output. This weakened food supply and economic stability. And then external pressure. The rise of Islamic powers shifted control of the Red Sea trade routes. Also, Akum became increasingly isolated from the global commerce. All right. So, my question to you, brothers, is it says the rise and fall lesson. What can Akum's decline teach us about how environmental issues and shifting global economies can impact powerful nations today?
And we had read this in the
We did.
on last week too as well about the deforestation, the
Right.
soil exhaustion, and the possible climate change. Those things over time, they weaken the food supply, and that creates economic instability. And so for us that today, it's not too far off. There's problems with climate change and resource depletion and unsustainable land use. It seems to be that's why most countries are at one another is for resources and to be able to obtain them. And Africa was a perfect example of that. There was the trade route shifts as we again as last week too. Once Axum's wealth was dependent on the Red Sea, and so once those trade routes shifted, there was a change in political powers. Then you had the expansion of the Islamic trade networks, and Axum lost their position. As the economy shrank, so did the global trade. And so today, how does that apply today? Nothing different. I mean, it's new shipping routes, technology changes, the emerging markets. Once a nation, starts to lose that economic power, they somewhat become irrelevant in the global trade. They're not a part of that, part of that change, so to speak. And so, overabundance is dangerous. Their economy was heavily reliant upon agriculture and trade. They had no fallback, nothing to fall back on. And so, how does that apply today? Countries overly dependent upon oil, or they have one single export or one industry. That's very vulnerable for sudden decline if something were to happen. There's no diversification for survival. And as you just mentioned, decline is it wasn't sudden, but it's a gradual thing in that regard. So you lose the influence and internal weakening, you become regionally isolated, and your infrastructure starts to decay, environmental change, economic stagnation, all those things. You lead to the end of an empire.
Yes.
Let's see. That's it.
Yes, sir.
You pretty much covered it all, man. I mean, I agree with you.
I'm sorry, brother.
No, it's all good, brother.
All right, brother.
It was great.
That was it for me, brothers, on my bullet points and my 3 questions.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to chapter 5.
Yes,
the Ghana Empire. So my first topic on this chapter is the Ghana Empire was really Ouagadougou. The identity, location, and the founding legend of Ouagadougou. When we hear the term Ghana Empire, the first thing we need to understand is that this ancient empire is not the same thing as the modern country of Ghana. This chapter makes it clear right away that modern Ghana was named after the old empire, but the empire itself was actually called Ouagadougou. The word Ghana was not originally the name of the land. It was the title of the ruler, the king of the land. That matters because it shows how outside writers, especially Arab writers, helped shape the name that later generations remembered. This chapter explains that scholars do not fully agree on exactly when the empire was founded. There is archaeological evidence of settlement in the region before 300 CE, but the earliest settlement belonged to the Dahar Tajet culture, later between 300 and 500. The Sonic people settled the area and named it Ouagadougou. So the rise of Ghana was connected to the Soninic people, who are presented in this chapter as the core people behind the kingdom. It's a hard word to say.
Soninique.
Soninic. Another key point is the location of Ghana. The empire had no access to the Atlantic coast at all. It was completely inland in Saal, 100 miles north of the Niger River, and is now now be Western Mali, or in southeastern Mauritania, Mauritania. That is important because many people may assume powerful African empires had to be coastal, but Ghana's strength came from its inland strategic location, not from access to the ocean. So a little different than a lot of the African kingdoms, who was usually by a big water source. The chapter shifts into the legend of the Wagadu kingdom, which gives us insight on how the Soninic remember their own origins. In the oral tradition, a common ancestor named Dinga came from somewhere in the Middle East, settled in the Niger Delta, and became the forefather of the Soninic people. This story becomes even more legendary when Dinga battles spirits, marries the daughters of the spirits, and fathers sons who becomes founders of the Soninic clans. Later, a son named Diab Sis rises to power, gather followers, and helps found the kingdom. One of the most memorable parts of the legend is the story of the giant python Beta, who guarded the future site of Kaumbi Selah. Daib Sis made a deal with the snake, and the kingdom could remain there if Bida stayed in as the guardian. But exchanged, Bida demanded the yearly sacrifice of one beautiful girl. In return, the snakes guaranteed rainfall, fertility. Whether literal or symbolic, this legend reveals something deeper. The Soninic linked political unity, agriculture, fertility, and spiritual power all together. Their founding story was not just about leadership, but it was about survival, order, and the balance between people and nature. So, question for first discussing question: why do you think the origin legends like the story of Dinga and Beta mattered so much to the Soninic people, and what do those legends tell us about how they understood power, unity, and survival?
I'll go. It tells us that I think what was strong about it is that we come. They were basically saying that we come from the same roots. We belong to the same system. So it brought that unity together, especially an empire made of different and diverse groups. Also, too, it showed how they understood power in relationship between humans and nature. The spiritual world, prosperity, it wasn't just random. It was something that had to be maintained through balance and obedience. Also, too, these legends reinforce leadership through authority. If rulers were seen as connecting to a sacred tradition or divine system, their power wasn't just political; it was spiritual and unquestionable. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'll just piggyback off that as well. The origin legends, like the story of Dinga and Baido, they're central to the identity of the Soninke people.
Hmm.
But as frameworks for understanding power, unity, and survival, especially in relation to the rising states of Guyana. So, power is sacred and conditional.
Hmm.
It's in the legend, the serpent Bida ensures prosperity, especially in rainfall and gold. But only if the people honor that sacrifice, as he was requesting, of the young lady.
Right.
Power.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
power. Power isn't random. It is granted and sustained through obligation. And leadership and prosperity are tied to spiritual balance, not just as force. And not just in some inky people, understood that power is maintained through responsibility, or it will be lost. And as far as unity is a requirement for stability. You know, the agreement with Bida, also required collective participation. Everyone had to accept
Hmm.
the terms.
Right.
Society survives through shared belief and cooperation. Breaking unity leads to collapse. A divided society cannot sustain power, even if it once had it. As far as survival requires hard choices. The sacrifice in the story is difficult, which reflects the deeper truth. So Survival sometimes demands costly decisions. Leadership involves choosing between individual loss and collective survival, which I'm sure all of us on this podcast have experienced at sometimes in making those hard decisions as you go throughout this life. You live long enough, you will experience that.
Right.
Uh, Survival is not always fair, but it is strategic if you go about it. So the consequences of breaking that, when the agreement with Biden was broken, as Chris had mentioned, the rain stops, prosperity ends, the kingdom declines, And so what that reveals is systems, whether spiritual, political, economic, must be respected. Sudden change without balance can destroy stability. Let's see. So the story of Dinga and Bida shows that the Sundiata people view society as a delicate balance, as Ru had mentioned. Power comes with conditions. Unity is essential. Survival requires sacrifice. Systems must be respected.
Right on, man. Yeah. Yeah, that origin story is definitely important to the Sundiata people. We'll move on to topic 2 of this chapter. Ghana became rich through trade, geography, and the control of resources. So the second major point in this chapter is that Ghana Empire became powerful because it was positioned to dominate trade. The Sonic traded with the Berber peoples of the Sahara, and the Sahara nomads acted as the intermediaries between West Africa and the regions north of the desert. This trade helped Ghana become one of the richest kingdoms in West Africa. This chapter places special emphasis on gold and salt. Ghana controlled an important gold source through the text that says the gold did not come from deep mines in this case. Instead, it was washed down by the rain from the highlands and collected from streams. That detail is important because it also connects Ghana's prosperity directly to climate. If rainfall dropped, then even the gold supply would weaken. So their wealth was directly tied to climate. The king grew wealthy not only because of access to gold, but because he controlled it carefully. He was pretty stingy. According to the chapter, the king kept all the gold nuggets for himself, while the common people were only allowed to keep only gold dust. And on top of that, he taxed salt heavily. Importers paid 1 gold coin, and exporters paid 2 gold coins. So Ghana's wealth was not just based on finding resources, it was based on centralized control, taxation, and political authority. Trade also brought in horses, iron from the Berbers. Horses strengthened their warfare capabilities, helping Ghana dominate smaller neighboring clans. Iron had military value too, but it also had agricultural value for them because it allowed them to make better tools for the land for farming. That combination of military strength plus the farming productivity from that helped expand the kingdom and support their growing cities. So this chapter gives a wide range of goods. This is really important because Ghana was a major trade hub. So the different things they traded in was copper, dates, salt, slaves, iron tools, weapons, utensils, livestock, hides, cloth, pottery, medicinal herbs, grains, spices, fruit, honey, and cola nuts. And all the way up even to modern times, reached all the way up to Coca-Cola, getting cola nuts for their drinks.
That's right.
It's pretty interesting about the cola nuts because it shows that the West African trade included not just precious goods, but everyday commodities that affected life, energy, and hospitality. Geography for Ghana made all this possible. Ghana sat in a position that let it control the trans-Sahara routes. Caravans moved goods across the desert toward Middle East and the Mediterranean. Camels introduced into North Africa by the 5th century made this system far more effective. This chapter says the caravans could range from 6 to 2,000 camels. That shows the huge scale of the trade. Experts from Sahā, Berber guides were essential because the desert travel could take months and dangerous without knowledge of food and water sources. The Kombi Selah, often described as the capital, though the sources are somewhat contradictory. Al-Bakri described it as 2 nearby cities, one for the king in the Muslim city with 12 mosques with commoners living between them. Whether all of this details were correct or not, the key takeaway is that Ghana had become a major urban commercial center. Even if Columbus Selah was not the capital in the strictest sense. It was clearly one of the empire's most important trade hubs. So my question for this topic is what was Ghana's greatest strength? Its natural resources like gold or its ability to control trade routes with tax commerce? Which of those mattered more in building an empire?
So I would say that. Oh, you want to go ahead, Robert? Okay, but gold alone didn't make them powerful. It was definitely them controlling the trade routes. No doubt, especially across the Sierra Desert. Ghana didn't just own gold; they controlled and moved gold. I mean, that's powerful. That's powerful. It taxed traders entering and exiting the empire, and then kind of like Nick mentioned, as far as paying 1 or 2 coins, depending on who you were, and acted as a middleman, which you mentioned that before, connecting North Africa to the Sub-Saharan Africa. So that itself is significant. But if you have gold but no system to distribute it or profit from it, your power is limited. But if you control the network, you control everyone who depends on it.
Yep,
that's right. That's right. And I'll just add to that, Karu, is that's you're dead on. It's a great question. Ghana's greatest strength was not just its gold, but its control over the trade routes and its ability to tax people as they did. They became powerful because it turned its resources into a system of control. With the gold, they attracted traders from North Africa and beyond and made Ghana economically important. It gave the kingdom a valuable export. Many regions had the gold, but not all of them were empires. Gold created opportunity, but not dominant by itself. Who we mentioned about the trade routes was the real power, and he's dead on. The salt mines and the trade networks to the Sahara. Control of the trans-Saharan trade routes. So not everybody could just cross that desert. They had to have guides. To who knew the route to do that, and Ghana absolutely took advantage of that. For those that tried to do that were lost, and many of them perished right out there in the middle of that desert. So they were the middleman, so to speak, and they regulated who can trade and how much they could trade. Wealth flowed through Ghana, not just from it. So they had to go in both ways, in and out, which made them very powerful. And as Chris had mentioned about the taxation, so that also added to their revenue, as well. And so, the factors: gold resources attracted trade route control, directed trade, taxation sustained the empire. And so controlling and taxation of trade matter more than the gold itself. One powerful lesson from the Ghana Empire is that resources make you valuable, control makes you powerful, but systems make you lasting, and they certainly managed and multiplied that to their benefit.
Yeah, I agree for the most part, but in my opinion, I do think that gold was the most important thing for them because they really didn't have anything until they got to that location, and it was special because the gold did wash down by rainfall. And if that gold never came down, they would never went anywhere or even became an empire. But that's just my opinion.
Okay.
So topic 3 really goes into how they actually fell, which is the last topic. Ghana's decline came from multiple pressures: religion, trade, struggle, and the climate change. So the third major point in Ghana did not collapse because of one single event. Its decline was gradual and came from several forces pressing through at the same time. The chapter first presents decline through legend. In the story, as a young man kills the python Bida to stop the sacrifice of his fiancée. As Bida dies, he curses the kingdom with drought and a lack of gold. The provinces then break apart, and the Sonanik are forced to leave their capital. The chapter directly says that this curse symbolizes climate change in the Sa'al. In other words, the legend preserves a memory of real environmental hardship. Less rain meant dry land, weaker farming, less gold washing in from the streams. That alone would have damaged the economic foundation of the kingdom. But climate was the only part of the problem. The chapter then explains that the spread of Islam into the Sahara region. Islam spread first among the Berbers people in the 8th century. And then later, the Almoravid movement gained strength. Around 1042, the Almoravids began consolidating power among the Saharan Berber, and by 1048, they had enough military force to challenge them. By 1054, the Sonanik had lost Aguahast, which was a very important trading city for them. What is important here is that the Almoravids brought not only military pressure, but religious pressure. The chapter says that they were devoted to enforcing stricter Islamic practices, reading the Quran, fasting, praying, regularly avoiding alcohol, and over time their influence pushed the Sunnitic people to abandon their old snake-centered religion and to join Islam. Still, the chapter is careful to not oversimplify this. It specifically says that the decline of the Ghana did not occur simply because of the Almoravids, but Ghana managed to recover Aqua Dost and remained rich and powerful until at least the 12th century. Archaeological evidence from Agua Daghast and Kombi Selah supports that this was not only a quick fall, but Ghana remained the economic force even while under pressure. The final collapse came as these problems kept on stacking up. The Sanha people continued to fight for control over the trade as climate change continued to pressure the Sonanik to leave once their prosperous cities in search for more fertile land. They were losing a lot of their gold. In the 12th century, the decline accelerated, leaving a power vacuum in Western Africa. Out of that vacuum, smaller chiefdoms began to unite around wetter river and lake regions, especially the upper Niger. But by the 13th century, those smaller kingdoms joined together in a new state, the Mali Empire. So one of the biggest lessons from this chapter is that empires do not usually fall for one reason. Ghana declined because of a combination of environmental stress, trade competition, political fragmentation, and also religious change. And at the same time, its decline created the conditions for the rise of the next major African empire. So my question I have is, which factor do you think mattered most in Ghana's fall? Climate change, loss of trade control, outside political religious pressure, or internal fragmentation, and why?
Well, you just said it there at the end. So all of them mattered in the decline of it. It just which one, which had the greatest impact. And so the loss of control, of trade control, was the most decisive factor, but it undercut everything else. So with the loss of trade, go from the south. Go from the south, yes, south from the north. Taxes on the merchants moving between regions. So what changed with that is that new trade routes were developed that bypassed Ghana, and as you mentioned about the rival powers, gained access to the gold sources directly. So trade no longer needed to have Ghana as the middleman, and so the result of that was revenue drop, political authority weakened, military power declined. Once Ghana lost control of the trade, it lost its economic engine. And the climate change was also a contributing factor as well, as we've read numerous times through with these kingdoms. Drought, desert expansion, reduced agricultural productivity, which caused food shortages, population strain not able to feed the people, weakened internal stability. Although it weakened it, but it wasn't the only thing. It certainly made things worse for sure. You mentioned political and religious pressure. You mentioned the Islamic influence from North and West Africa, military pressures from groups like the Amorids. How you say it?
Yeah, I know I had a hard time saying it too, man. Amorivides.
Amorivides. Yeah, so they disruption of the trade networks, cultural and political shifts, and then you have the internal fragmentation. Provinces gaining independence, declining cultural authority, leadership struggles, which had an impact on it reduced the unity, lost less control over territory and trade. So, you know, the most important thing was absolutely the trade control, but the climate and the climate stress, external pressure, and internal fragmentation absolutely played a part in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think also they kind of slowly lost hope. I mean, their their kingdom was really built on their religion with the snake, and maintaining that tradition. And then when that young king decided to take over, and when his fiance was put up for sacrifice, he went against his people, slayed the snake, and then once after that, everything kind of fell like dominoes, and so you can see a decline. Everything just stacked up.
Kings, I don't have much to say. I feel like you guys said it all. Said it all. My notes are basically the same as what you guys have. So I'll move on.
Defo, bro. Defo, bro. We're next gonna move into the as Chris had mentioned there, the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire. So there wasn't a whole much of a the chapter was very small on that, and I believe I had read it's because that where the empire was located, there hadn't been very much archaeological excavation to search for, but anyway, still was a powerful empire in itself. So my first bullet point is the creation of the Mali Empire based on the Sandiata epic. The Epic of Sandiata, also called the Sandiata Epic, is the primary traditional account of how the Mali Empire was founded. It was an West African empire that existed from 1226 to 1610 CE. There were several key groups in the creation of the Mali Empire. The Soninke people were associated with an earlier following group from the Ghana Empire, which existed before Mali. They symbolize continuity and inheritance of power. Their political order, systems, influence, and traditions Mali would eventually absorb. Before the greatness of Mali, they were oppressed by the Soso Empire, ruled by the uh, Soso King and sorcerer King Kanti. He conquered much of the Mandan region during the period of the Ghana Empire. He was a destroyer of the remnants of Ghana, which were tied to the Soninke people. The Mandi people suffered through its brutality, chaos, fear, and domination. However, it was through those tribulations that their first ruler was forged. The Mali Empire was founded by Sundiata Kita of the Mandi people. He ruled from 1214 to 1255. Um, the Epic of Sandiata was a primary traditional account that the Mali Empire was founded. It blends history with mythology and introduces several key groups, some symbolic, some real, who contributed to its creation. Let's see here. The Mandi were the core founders. Excuse me, fellas. Sorry about that. Were the core founders of the Mali Empire. The people was of Sandika Gita. They formed the backbone of the empire. The unity is the central theme of the story. And so my first bullet point question, how did earlier civilizations such as the Ghana Empire influence the formation of the Mali Empire?
I mean, really, the Mali Empire wouldn't exist without the Ghana Empire. The Ghana Empire
True.
already had trade routes and pretty much everything for a kingdom established. But they had to abandon their kingdom, and Mali just picked up where they left off.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much inherited it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on Chris. Ghana basically laid the groundwork for what made Mali. It controlled the trans-Sahara trading routes, dealing with gold and salt,
Mhm.
built system taxation, governments, same thing. Provided the West African could sustain a powerful, organized empire. So I agree with you guys on that one.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, moving on. So my next bullet point is more or less to provide insight on the two greatest rulers of the Mali Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when discussing the greatest rulers of the Mali Empire, two names stand above all others: Sundiata Kita and Mansa Musa.
And
They
some Musa.
represent two different but equally powerful forms of greatness, foundation, and expansion. So, Sundiata Kita was the founder. He was the architect of power.
Mm-hmm.
He lived from 1217 to 1255 CE, and this legendary founder of Mali, whose story is preserved in the Epic of Sandiata. His greatest achievements, the unification of the Mandi people, brought together fragmented kingdoms, built alliances across ethnic groups, created a coalition-based empire. His power came from unity, not just conquest. Um, he defeated King Kanti, ended the Soso domination, restored autonomy to the region. This was both a political and psychological victory. He established law and order, credited with forming the early systems of the Koruikan Fuega. It was a constitutional charter defining roles across societies, nobles, artisans, and buyats. He created structure, not just rule. His leadership style was strategic, inclusive, visionary. He understood that a strong empire is built on systems and people, not just power. His legacy, Sandiata is remembered as the father of Mali, a symbol of resilience and destiny, the blueprint of African state building. State building. And so the second ruler is Mansa Musa, the expander, as they called him, the symbol of wealth and influence, who he was. He lived from 1312 to 1337 CE and is widely considered the richest individual in history. His greatest achievements, he controlled vast gold and salt resources, made Mali the wealthiest empire of its time. Wealth became a tool of global influence under his governance. Uh, he also had the famous pilgrimage. If you haven't read that, I encourage all those to read that. It's pretty amazing what he did there. His journey to Mecca in 324 put Mali on the world map. Distributed so much gold it affected economies in places like Cairo. He transformed Mali into an international power. Uh, he invested in education and in religion, developed cities like Timbuktu into centers of learning, built mosques, libraries, and universities. He turned Mali into a cultural and intellectual hub. He was generous, diplomatic, vision driven. He understood that wealth is most important when it builds knowledge and reputation. His legacy is remembered as a symbol of African wealth and sophistication, a ruler who expanded Mali's global influence, a builder of knowledge and based society. So, on a deeper comparison, um, Sandiata Kita built the foundation. Musa expanded the empire. Kieta united people. Musa elevated global status. Kieta created systems. Musa built institutions. Sandiata Kita, warrior and strategist. Mansa Musa was diplomat and visionary. So Sandiata built what could last. Mansa Musa made it known to the world. Together, they showed the true greatness requires vision, what to build, structure, how to sustain it, expansion, how to grow it. So, my question for that is how did the leadership styles of Sandiata Kita and Mansa Musa reflect different stages in the development of the Mali Empire, and why were both styles necessary for its long term success?
Um, so Sandiata Keita, again, a warrior, a unifier, a builder. Basic leadership came out of chaos. His main mission was to unify divided tribes, to defeat enemies, and establish a stable foundation. You said something that was key. When it came down to each one of them, Keita being the warrior, but Massa Musa being the visionary, the expander, for what he's known for. Not just a king, but a symbol of wealth and culture and global influence. Expanding the trade and wealth, promoting education and religion, and putting Mali on the world stage, especially through, like you said, the famous pilgrimage of Mecca. Again, two leaders, two styles, one empire. One built the foundation, the other one built the legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, why were both leadership styles necessary? Well, I mean, right after the fall of the Ghana Empire, that whole region was kind of chaotic, and they were all kind of against each other, fighting for resources.
Right.
Nobody was unified. So Keita came in. He was, like you said, he was a warrior king. He built the foundation for the next empire, and that region needed that, and
Right.
so that was his style. He was able to unify and conquer the region to unify them. And then as Mansa Musa came in, he was more of the religious guy, a little more charismatic
Right.
on the political end, and he grew the empire through more words and talking versus fighting.
Right.
He definitely spent a lot of money on that trip to Mecca.
Yes, he did.
Man,
Yes, he did.
I mean, somebody
he
really wanted people to know what he was doing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
no doubt, no doubt,
Oh yeah.
no doubt. Okay, bullet point number 3 is the power struggle and the end of the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire experienced, a long decline after its peak under rulers like Mansa Musa and his successors. The decline was caused by a combination of internal power struggles, weak leadership, economic challenges, and external pressures. So the internal power struggles. After Mansa Musa and Mansa Saluman, Mali lacked strong and consistent leadership. Several factors contributed to internal instability: succession disputes, uh, regional autonomy, court intrigues. This mirrors how empires built on strong leadership often fracture once the founding or visionary leaders are gone. 2, economic challenges. Decline of trade routes. Mali's wealth depended heavily on trans-Saharan trade in gold and salt. Over time, trade routes shifted and were disrupted by new powers. Over reliance on gold, which seems to be a reoccurring theme throughout these kingdoms. While
Right.
gold had fueled Mali's global influence under Mansa Musa, other regions began mining and trading gold independently, reducing Mali's monopoly. Resource depletion. Intensive gold and agricultural exploitation led to environmental and economic stress. The external pressures. Rival empires and states, neighboring powers such as the Songhai Empire, gradually challenged Mali's dominance. Military attacks, repeated invasions weakened Mali's territories and exposed internal divisions. Loss of influence. As other West African states grew, Mali could no longer control trade networks or maintain the prestige of earlier rulers. So the end of the empire. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, Mali had fragmented into smaller states, losing cohesion. Timbuktu and other key cities under the influence of rising powers like the Songhai Empire. The once rich empire had diminished both economically and politically, marking the end of the Mali as a dominant West African power. The rise and fall of the empire demonstrate a cycle seen in many empires. Strong unification and leadership, Sandiata Kita, equals empire foundation. Peak wealth and global recognition, Mansa Musa, cultural and economic height. Weak succession and internal conflict, fragmentation and decline. External pressures accelerate collapse, equals the end of the empire. Mali's decline was not sudden, but the result of gradual erosion of central authority, economic control, and military strength combined with external threats. So, my bullet point question is: what lessons can be learned from the Mali Empire about the relationship between strong leadership and long term survival of an empire?
I really think, man, what Mali is teaching us, and it's really the same with all three empires we're talking about tonight. With the Kingdom of Axum, the Ghana Empire, and the Mali Empire. The one thing that all these empires have in common is they were all based on trade, was where most of their power came from. And that's also where they were weak at, is because their kingdom relied solely on another kingdom's ability to trade with them. And if that trade route got shifted, got changed, the kingdom suffered heavily because that's what they were pretty much based off of. And we can even see that now. I mean, get on a little more deeper level with the world, we see every kingdom, they rise and fall, and they're all always trying to maintain their borders or expanding their borders. And no matter what, if we continue this path, every country, the United States, China, Russia, every country is trying to maintain their borders, which if you do have a country and you want to maintain your beliefs, you have to have a border. But at the same time, you trying to maintain your border still affects the next person. And that's why we constantly have rise and fall of kingdoms. Hopefully one day, we don't have to have borders as a human race, and we can have the earth as a kingdom, and instead of us trying to like, hey, our culture and our religion matters more than yours. And I think there can be a point at one day where we can all unify not necessarily under religion, but as a human race. And I believe we could all have our own religious beliefs and still be able to succeed and unify as one. But that can't happen if we constantly maintain these borders and thinking that our country has to be in control of the world.
That's right.
I mean, it doesn't matter where we are in the world, if it comes from Africa, if it comes from the Americas, or it comes from Europe. I mean, either way, it's the same story being told.
I think the Mali story makes another thing clear is that strong leadership can build an empire, but consistency and adaptable leadership can sustain it. During the original Kiete, Mali was built on strength and unity. It stabilized order, created alliances, laid a political and social foundation that allowed the empire to grow. This shows the early stage of empires needing, unity and leadership to even exist, right? But Mansa Musa, whose leadership reflected a different stage, which he expanded wealth, promoted education, religion, we know all that, elevated Mali's global reputation. His reign shows that once stability is achieved, leadership must shift towards growth, culture, and international influence. So I think one of the greatest downfalls of Mali was that the next upcoming leaders, they weren't building leaders for generational wealth, right? And that severely hurt them. Leaders lack the same strength and vision, which is big. Central authority weakened, and then control over trade, territory started to slip. So empire survival depends not just on one great leader, but a system, right? A system that produces strong leaders of other generations or over generations is what I would say. Yeah. So
And it's also their ability to adapt.
yes.
It seems like once they
Right.
got, like when the trade routes would shift, or there wasn't that ability to adapt and
Right.
overcome. It was kept with the same thing, and it's that recurring thing, man. It's like it is amazing. And the gold, like I'm really fascinated about the wealth of the gold that
Right.
these
Yeah.
kingdoms had. It's
Right.
just insane.
Right.
And
Where's all that gold now, man? They had a lot of it.
they did. Hey, it's
Yeah.
they still mining that stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
it's plenty
Mhm.
in Africa. It's hence the colonization of the continent itself. But to what you said, Chris, too, you mentioned, like kingdoms, they don't last forever.
Right.
They just don't last forever. At one time, and it's no different with our current times. And everybody plays their part. One up,
Mhm.
one down. The next one is the next one is the next one is the next one. Everything is interconnected. And to what you spoke on about borders, if we could find that kind of civil continuity instead of the greed, I guess you could say, about the resources, and I gotta have this, you can't have that, and I say you can't have it because I'm bigger than you, and it's a vicious cycle.
But you know what the biggest problem we have is in today is our religions. They scare people into believing in the new world order.
Right.
And so they're scared that if our world decides to unify as a human race, that's actually a bad thing.
Right.
And lots of religions, I know I was taught that growing up as a kid, that if the world unifies, that's the new world order, and that's the devil.
Right.
And a lot of people think that it's bad if the world unifies.
Right.
And I don't see how that's bad.
Right. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah.
But once again, it goes back to people wanting control and being tribal.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
And I agree with you too. If that were to happen, it shouldn't be based on religion. That as we have in this short period of time, religion seems to be
The downfall.
the downfall.
The downfall of many.
I think religion is more just not the downfall. I think it's the tool people use to control sheep,
Yeah.
to control people that are ignorant, that don't expand their knowledge. And we have history, and that's kind of what this book club's about. Is about learning history.
Mhm.
The point of learning history is to actually learn from it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we have all this facts and knowledge that's in front of our face, but we're still being controlled by dogmatic perspectives of how we were taught to view and read this material. So you have to deconstruct the thought process of how you were taught, especially if you were in public school system or if you went to a religion, that religion and views in public school, they dictate how you think and how you understand material. And if for you to actually understand it and learn something new, we have to deconstruct our previous thoughts on how on what the sometimes of a definition of even of a word. So I think we all, when we learn this material, we really need to think about like our beliefs, and then compare that to the material we're reading, so we can actually have a understanding and maybe actually change our opinion.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm with you. I think religion is definitely about control. You know, and for people to change that, that's difficult because that's been rooted in for for a while now. You know, for decades. You know, and so but on which the history itself can play a prominent part of our understanding. And you know what I think? I'm a firm believer the Egyptians, you know thyself. I feel like people, that's the first thing people don't understand is themselves. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what leads them into I would say maybe the trap of religion, is because, even we read certain books where, it spoke of religion as being something for the miserable. You know what I mean? Dr. Edward French stated that, the religion was for miserable and for people who needed something to lean on, to help pull themselves up, which is, again, it's okay, again, but yet again, it's only a point of standing up. And then once you're standing up, you need to go into a new light or to a new understanding.
Gentlemen, dead on. Hey, it starts with you. Every
It does.
decision, everything starts with you. And hey, history leaves clues.
It
The
does.
only way, it seems to me in this point in time, as Chris had mentioned, to deconstruct, is you got to pick up a book and break those barriers and those walls down
Hmm.
to give yourself a shot, because this stuff is listen, it's easily attainable. You got the internet now. You can't pick up a book, you can certainly got audio. You can
Right.
get on here and read it that way. It's fascinating to learn the truth, a lot of the truth, and what things are not what you think they are. It's just my opinion. You should question everything that there is.
Hmm.
Absolutely everything.
Hmm.
Always question.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And you
Yes.
can't learn new material if you don't question.
No.
That's right. That's
Mm-mm.
right. That's right.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
You gotta open up this. You gotta open up this big thing right here and let that stuff come in. You gotta open up that big thing right there.
Yeah, that third. Hey, they say that third eye, right? What is it? The third eye? That's a whole nother conversation.
That is. That is.
Absolutely. King Mackie, you got the spotlight for the night?
I got the spotlight for tonight, fellas. All right. So, spotlight feature tonight is Claudetta Colvin. Claudetta Colvin. So, why she's so perfect for this spotlight? Before Rosa Parks became the face of the bus boycott, Claudetta Colvin already took the stand, and almost nobody talks about her. Her story: in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, a 15-year-old girl refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus. The girl was Claudetta Colvin. She was arrested, handcuffed, and taken to jail. This happened 9 months before Rosa Parks. She later became a key plaintiff in the case that helped end the bus segregation. But here's the part that hits deeper. She didn't become the face of the movement. Why? She was young. She was from a poor background. She later became pregnant, which leaders feared would affect public, perception. So here she just moved past her. But she's a prominent source in understanding of what true resilience really is. And at 15 years old, she stood on it. So before the world stood Rosa Parks, a 15-year-old girl named Claudetta Colvin sat down and history stood up on her shoulders. That is a spotlight for tonight, which is Claudetta Colvin.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Right on. Right on.
Brother. I thank
Yes,
you
sir.
for that. Beautiful podcast, gentlemen. Beautiful, beautiful podcast.
Absolutely.
Beautiful podcast.
We starting a new book now, right?
Yes, we are. We are. It will be. Excuse me. I believe this is it right here.
Ooh.
Ancient
Yes,
Kingdom
sir.
of Africa. That will be the next book on the list. The next book on the list. listen, we encourage your likes, your thoughts, your suggestions, your opinions, your questions, anything you might want to add. We are on YouTube, Deezer, Apple Podcasts. What's the other one? Spotify, uh, Riverside FM. If you can't view us on the video, certainly as you're driving down that road or walking on that walk, getting the exercise in, you can plug us in and you can listen to our beautiful voices as well. Absolutely. King Mackie, King Wilkins. RP. It's been beautiful, King.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Till next time, brothers. Till next time.
That's right. Oh,
Have a good evening.
Tuesday night open mic night. Tuesday night
Yes.
open mic night. Join us there.
Yes.
Rock and roll.
Hey, you gonna love Tuesdays nights. You gonna love Tuesday nights. And our other co-host Corey will be back. King Corey be back with us on Tuesday. So tap in. Y'all definitely tap in.
Absolutely. Peace.
Right on. Peace.
Love y'all. Peace.